Hey guys, so I was not sure if I want to make this video here today, but in the end I thought it might be interesting for some of you, and I always wanted to make a video about such a topic actually. So here we go. So yesterday I made a guide for Flurry. This was my first rogue video guide for Season 6. We are currently more than 2 weeks into Season 6 and I've played the Spiritborn quite exclusively, so I have to admit I'm a huge Spiritborn fan at this point. But anyways, many of you guys asked me to show you some rogue guides, since this channel is, is based around the rogue class. So I thought, yes, it's time for some rogue content. And I was uploading this guide here, and I uploaded some gameplay from the last PTR I still had on my computer. And this was not so well received by many of you, so the feedback was that it's not a good idea to show 1 month old PTR gameplay during a live season, and that many of you guys didn't like this approach of mine. So in this video today I want to quickly talk about this topic, but also go further and talk about Theorycrafting. But in a nutshell, I responded to your feedback because, of course, feedback is important for me and I don't want to disappoint my core community or whatever. So here I wrote in my pinned comment that I agree with you guys. PTR gameplay is not the same as live game. And it would be much better if I would have a endgame rogue with fully equipped gear that I could show you some actual live game. So of course I agree on that it's always better. But I also have made clear my point here that I am not only Diablo 4 player, but I see myself more as a Theorycrafter. So today I want to talk about this topic: what actually is a Theorycrafter and what is the difference between these different definitions, let's say. So, in my opinion, a Theorycrafter is someone who goes way more deep into the game mechanics, let's say. So, you can have a normal Diablo 4 player, you can have a player and a content creator at the same time, and then you have Theorycrafters, which go very deep into game mechanics and go down into their own pits at home and just they go down for a few hours and straight calculate some stuff, some nerdy mathematical damage numbers and stuff like that. So this is what a Theorycrafter, in my opinion, is in Diablo 4 and in general. So I also want to talk about tier lists as an example. I think this is a good example to illustrate my point that I want to make clear. So since I'm a Mobalytics partner, I will talk about Mobalytics mainly in this video here, but of course there are many other sites on the internet as well that you also might know, and they all have in common that they are making tier lists. So also Mobalytics has their tier lists, and here, for example, for the rogue class we have a rogue lead, which in this case is Sanctum. So you also might know Sanctum. He's a very good Theorycrafter as well, and focusing on the rogue and also Spiritborn with the season. And he is basically updating this entire tier list here for Mobalytics every season. And here you can see, for example, he has like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rogue builds. It can be less, can be more, but he also has, for example, Spiritborn builds. So this Orange Quill Volley is also from Sanctum, and here we have some other Sanctum builds. So usually he has more than 10 builds that he has to update every season, and people will click at his builds and will use his builds, even though he did not play all of them, because you simply have no time to test all the builds. You cannot play 10 builds and also play them perfectly with good gear and push for the highest possible pit tiers and stuff like that. It's just not possible. Even though if you would be a full-time Diablo creator, let's say, I still think this would be just too much. But anyways, since he's updating the tier lists here, he has to make decisions which are based on his Theorycrafting, because he simply cannot test all these builds. And of course, you might say, well, some other sites have large teams. So I know, for example, Vodijo is working with a lot of people. They are always meeting and discussing the meta. And of course, if you have a large team, you can maybe test many builds at the same time. This is also much better than if you would be alone. But I think this is quite rare. And also for Mobalytics, I think it proves that it can work if you're on your own as well. So how do Theorycrafter do this stuff with tier lists? So for example, I also want to quickly show you here, I have a video that I uploaded 1 month ago after the PTR, where I also show you my tier list for Rogue. And this tier list is not made by my personal feelings, let's say. It's not only based on some assumptions, but it's based more on some facts and real numbers. So for example, you can see here in the definition of the tier lists, I have this different DPS numbers in the brackets. So S plus tier is for me a build which does more than 50 billion DPS, so damage per second. And here 10 billion, 5 billion, 2.5 billion, and so on. And these are actually true numbers that I have determined during my theory crafting sessions. This was a lot of work, but I wanted to do it so I have a baseline of rogue builds, which I can update in the future and just adjust them with time. But this is all based on some true numbers. And I want to show you how people like Sanctum and me usually like to work. So Sanctum, for example, if you didn't know, has this nice and handy rogue DPS calculator. So this is a Google sheet that he uses to determine the damage, estimated damage of all of his rogue builds. And some people from the Discord channel, from Sanctuary Discord, are also using his sheet because it's kind of organized, kind of easy to use. And also you might know his attack speed frame, frame breakpoints sheets. So he also tested some stuff for Quill Volley, and in the previous seasons he was doing a lot of rogue stuff. And also this frame breakpoint calculator is made by Sanctum. So the point here is that you don't have to test all the different builds each season. Especially you can't do it if you're doing tier lists and updating builds on sites like Mobalytics, but you can also do it with some tools like this damage calculation tools. So you can determine the estimated DPS of each rogue build, let's say, and just compare them to each other. So you don't have to test all of these builds. And now I want to show you my calculator. So I also use a calculator. I'm not using Sanctum's, but I have my own here, a bit more colorful, but also a bit more messy. So I'm also not sharing it too often with someone. I don't think it's easy to use for someone who's not in my mind. So this is only my personal tool here. So here I also have a lot of stuff which I can do in order to calculate some damage. So also I have here all the aspects, skills, paragon, some damage calculation in general. And yeah, I just can estimate the total DPS of some builds. And with tools like that, theory crafters like me are trying to make such tier lists, for example. So this is for me how theory crafting works and what theory crafting really means in Diablo 4. And this is far from normal playing and assuming and having a feeling of how things will work. So my point here is that, like I mentioned, if you cannot test all the builds at the same time, but you still want to provide your community with some solid builds, you can use some other stuff here, like some other tools. And also you have to keep in mind that people like me who focus on a class like Rogue for more than 1 year before the Spiritborn came out, we have a lot of experience. So I could build a Rogue build in theory, and I would be pretty sure that it will just work fine 80 to 90% of the stuff that I have theory crafted in my mind. But of course, it's better to have someone who's testing your stuff as well. So in the best case, you would have a solid theory crafter who's doing all of this math and nerdy stuff to determine the best setups with the highest damage and highest survivability. And then you have people who test the builds in the PTR, for example. And then you have a very good synergy and combination where you provide your community with the best builds possible, I believe. So this was the case for Flurry. I tested it in the last PTR, so I'm pretty confident sharing this build here with my community, even though I have not tested it in the live game. So this is the major point I want to make here. So the difference between theory crafting and just playing Diablo 4. And also, I want to agree that it would be better to do both, like I mentioned, theory crafting and testing. And of course, Blizzard tends to change a lot of stuff. So since the PTR came out, we had some more changes to the game. But so that's something I should maybe have I should have calculated more when I talk about the Flurry build, because you guys are also right. I put Flurry down here on A tier back then, and I still believe it's relatively A tier. But of course, we have some changes in form of less damage in general. So we have a stat squish, we're dealing less damage. The enemies in the game have higher damage reduction. We have glyphs that got nerfed by 50%, I believe. So, of course, we will deal way less damage in general. But this change, it does not only apply to Flurry, but it applies to all builds. So my mindset here is that all builds are nerfed at the same time, are weaker at the same time. So the relative change is 0, meaning that Flurry was A tier before and should still be A tier. It's just dealing way less damage than before, but just the same as all the other builds do. But of course, one information that I cannot provide you with, and I should have been more more precise about that, more reflective in my rogue video, is that I cannot tell you exactly what's the roof for this build. So what's the highest pit here you can imagine to clear? So of course I understand that is something very important to many people. They want to know if they can clear pit 100 with Flurry, for example. So this is some information I cannot tell you because I have not played endgame rogue in this season so far. So for that reason, it may be a good idea to check out some other channels, or I should have linked some gameplay from some Flurry players, which I also know from the Discord, like Picha Pao, for example. And then show you how they managed their Flurry builds and how high the pit was in their cases. So that's some missing information. I should have been more reflective about in my Flurry gameplay endgame guide. Because of course here I was pit 90 in the PTR, but now the pits are harder. Pit 19 PTR is something like pit 70 in live game. And also the glyphs nerf. So of course it's possible that this build will reach pit 80 at max and then it's finished. Maybe 85, I don't know. So that's something I cannot tell you for sure. So I agree on that. But I hope I gave you quite a useful overview about how theory crafting works, how tier lists work in Diablo 4, how Mobalytics handles this stuff, how other websites handle this stuff. And I also can link down some of the calculators in the description, so you might also use some of them if you like. So you can use this rogue damage calculator, you can use this breakpoints calculator, also here some Kapeleke vigor generation calculators, all of this theory crafting tools. I will link them down in the description, so maybe that's helpful for some of you guys. And yeah, I hope you learned something. I hope you understand my point of view a bit more, because that's actually the main point I also want to make. So in the future, my plan is actually to also work a bit more like this tier lists on Mobalytics, for example. So I also want to make my own tier lists, which I already started with this YouTube video lately, where I just, put down every rogue build or also Spiritborn builds into a tier list and provide you guys with build planners to all of the best builds at the start of the season. So actually that's what I wanted to do. I also wanted to share with you 10 rogue builds at the same time at the beginning of the season. But the problem was I was running out of time. It was a lot of stress for me. So I had to do a lot of Spiritborn stuff. I was writing some guides as well. I was testing the preview version. So I barely had no time updating all of these builds. Also the planners were updated quite late because all of this Paragon changes Blizzard made 3 days ago, the season start, let's say. So I could not make it this time, but my plan is to actually update all of these builds in time, so you guys can just start the fresh season with my fresh builds. And I cannot test all of these builds during a season, so I will continue to make videos or share builds of stuff I believe is very powerful, but I could not test 100%. And I hope that's fine for you guys. So this is my plan actually, and yeah. If you have a problem with that, you can of course visit some other channels. I think there are enough space for more creators in Rogue. But yeah, I will also make as usual Rogue guides with my endgame character on Rogue, so don't worry. But I will make a mixture of both in the future. So that's also a reason I wanted to make this video. Okay guys, that's it. I hope it was kind of interesting for you. I don't expect to have many views or something on this, but yeah, if you viewed this video, if you watched this video, thank you a lot. You can as always leave me a subscription and leave me a comment and like this video to support this channel. And I hope I'll see you in the next one. Until there, have a nice day guys, and bye bye.